It's so frustrating to lose a game just because of one annoying blunder. I used to do this myself, and now some of my students do it too. They blunder something, miss a fork, and immediately rush to resign. No, today I'm going to teach you how to come out of this situation as a winner. And I'll tell you about 11 ways to save a lost position, so you can beat your opponents even when it seems like you should just resign. My name is Kirill Klukin, I'm an international chess master, and I'm here to help you play better. Let's get started. If in this position, after black plays queen to a5, you think, oh no, my opponent's queen has delivered a double attack threatening my king and my bishop. I'll cover with my queen and give up the bishop on b5. My friend, no, never do that. Always check if after your opponent forks you on a5, you can defend your bishop with your knight. The knight can serve two purposes at once. It can shield your king and protect your bishop. And just like that, you've saved your piece. Here's a second similar case involving a fork on f5. Here you might think, okay, but this time I definitely don't have a knight on b1 that could save me and protect my bishop. Here I definitely have to cover with my queen and give up my bishop on a4. Again, no, you should play pawn to c3. The pawn shields you from your opponent's queen, protects your king, and the queen acts as the defender of the bishop, so once again you save all your pieces and don't let your opponent gain an advantage with the fork. Now you know how to fight against forks. Let's move on. The second common problem you might encounter is when your opponent puts pressure on your pinned knight with their pawn. That is, the bishop doesn't let it go anywhere and your opponent wants to win it simply by capturing it with a pawn. At this point, you might get upset, feel like there's no way out, try to defend your knight with your bishop, and end up in a bad exchange, losing a piece for just a pawn. Now, why the hell would you need that? Counterattack your opponent with the a pawn on the edge. If he takes your knight, you capture the bishop on b4, he takes on b2, you take the bishop on b2, and your bishop, on the contrary, moves into an active position and continues to help you attack your opponent's center. And if black tries to keep the pin by moving the bishop to a5, you keep chasing it away by playing b4. And if black takes the knight, you take the bishop. You've kept your piece, everything is fine. And if the bishop moves to b6, the knight goes straight to the center on d5. From a situation where it seemed like you were about to lose a piece, you've ended up with a fantastic position. Remember this. Let's move on. The third tricky situation you might face is if you forget that your opponent's queen is attacking your pawn on g2, and while trying to develop your bishop, they capture it. You might think that you're left without a rook in the corner, because it has nowhere to go and nothing to do. And you might want to give up. No, move your queen to f3 and tell your opponent, no way. I'll trade queens, I'll just be down a pawn and keep fighting, I'll do my best to keep playing. The same thing is possible if you move your bishop to e2 and your opponent takes your pawn on g2 with their queen, you can play bishop to f3. Sometimes you can even use this as a trap if along this diagonal the bishop could deliver some kind of second blow. Remember this. Let's move on. The fourth difficulty is similar to the third. After your pawn on g2 is taken by the queen and you have no way to defend your rook with the queen on f3, you start thinking about where to move your rook, and you'll probably put it on f1, closer to the king, so the king can protect it. No, that's not the best solution. It's better to play with tempo, bringing your rook to g1 to force your opponent's queen to move somewhere. The queen moves to h3. After that, you can continue by moving your rook to g3, placing it under the protection of two pawns while attacking the queen. The rook operates along the g-file. Sometimes you can even use this situation to trap your opponent's queen. Remember this, if you blunder a pawn on g2, you can make it so that your rook immediately becomes active. Let's move on. The sixth tip for the toughest positions is to check for intermediate moves. This is the best tool for professionals. An intermediate move is a move in the main line of a variation where you either give a check or make an unexpected attack on your opponent. In general, in any case, you make a move your opponent didn't expect, and you turn everything in your favor. Now it would seem that white is in huge trouble. The queen is under attack and so is the rook. If white takes the queen on d7, black captures the rook on b1 with check, then takes the queen and ends up with a ton of extra material. If we take the rook on b6, black captures the queen on g7, and again we lose. But what can white do here? White can play the queen to g4, forcing the opponent to capture with the queen on g4. This move is the intermediate one that black might have missed in the main line of variations. Black captures with the queen on g4. We capture with the pawn, giving another check, and we gain time because of this. And since the king takes on g4, we then capture on b6 with the rook, and in a situation where it seemed we were losing, we now start fighting for the win. The second example of an intermediate move, look at the position, it's roughly equal. In general, what might white want to do here? You might want to play rook to e6 if you spot this tactical blow, because the knight is defending the queen, and you might think, black will take our rook, for example, and we'll take the queen. But unexpectedly, black responds with the move queen to e3, and you might think, damn, I blundered, oh man, now I'll take the queen, they'll take my rook, and I'll end up with a worse position. But you need to surprise your opponent with the intermediate move rook to e8. Again, an unexpected check that allows you to gain time. Your opponent moves their king and you capture the queen. You have an extra bishop. Let's move on. The seventh way to turn around a lost position. For example, your opponent is about to checkmate you on the back rank and you realize, oh no, I forgot to make a luft, my king has nowhere to go, I have to capture the queen with my rook. And then your opponent's rook takes my rook and delivers checkmate. A brilliant tactic from your opponent to sacrifice the queen in order to deliver checkmate. Not at all. When you're in check, block it with your other rook. Your rooks start working together, helping and protecting each other. And in this situation, black can't do anything anymore and they fail to deliver checkmate. But just in case, to avoid taking risks, remember to keep your king safe, don't overlook back rank mates, and make a luft, escape square. Let's move on. The eighth common situation is when, right at the start of the game, your knight can get trapped in the center of the board. After the move bishop to d3, white attacks our knight, and it doesn't have a single good move left. Where could it go to avoid being attacked by the opponent? You need to protect it, move the pawn to d5. But white can capture en passant, and the knight is left unprotected again. So what's the point? Just go back, capture that pawn with your knight, and get out of trouble unscathed. The knight is saved. Another option would be to protect the knight with the f-pawn, and if white captures on f6, we recapture with the knight. And once again our knight survives. Everything is fine, the game goes on. Let's move on. The ninth situation is about how you can often overlook a fork on the king and rook. And for example, after the move knight to b4, you might think, well, I'll attack the bishop with g4, and after knight to c2, you grab your head again, thinking the game is over. We've lost material, at the very least lost a rook and lost the game. No, we play king to d2. And after your opponent takes the rook on a1, you take the other, opposite piece that you are attacking. In this case, it's the bishop. And notice that the knight has no way out from the edge of the board. The rook is attacking it, but the knight can't escape. And that means you capture two pieces in exchange for one rook. And as you know, two pieces are stronger than one rook. So you actually come out of this situation as the winner. 10th. If your opponent assails two of your vulnerable pawns at the same time and one of them is positioned on the very edge, try to implement a clever tactic to effectively trap their attacking knight. What do I mean by that? Move your pawn to c3, lure him into capturing the pawn on a 2, and then bring your king to b1 to capture that knight and win it. Often you shouldn't take pawns on the edge of the board because they're poisoned, and in such cases the piece gets trapped. And of course, don't panic after your opponent delivers a double attack. But if you try to move your pawn to a 3, it won't work anymore, because after the move knight to c2, it's hard to catch the knight. He has so many possible squares. Where could he hide? A similar situation occurs if the bishop takes the edge pawn. Let's say you blundered it, or you can set a trap for your opponent. And now your task is to trap that bishop and then bring your king to b2 in order to capture it. And a situation that follows from this. If you happen to allow this on your side, send your edge pawn sprinting down the sideline like Roberto Carlos. What do I mean by that? You need to free your bishop while your opponent is bringing their king or any other piece to capture it. You can use your pawn by sacrificing it to manage to set your bishop free in time. He takes it, and your bishop is free. If the king blocks and we capture on b3, the bishop is freed via b1. If it goes to b2, it doesn't make sense. We capture the pawn on c2, and when the bishop is taken, the pawn promotes. And finally, the 11th way to avoid a losing situation. If your opponent is trying to win your queen, you miss the move bishop to f7, and you're forced to retreat with your king, leaving your queen undefended, because moving the king to a7 is even worse. After bishop to g5 with a discovered attack, white wins the queen. That doesn't work. But notice that here the rank is quite open. And after capturing your opponent's bishop, following the move queen to d8, you can move your bishop away with check and win back the queen, regaining it. Never give up, always check all the possibilities to the end, and look for ways to surprise your opponent and turn a losing situation into a victory. Give this video a really big like if you found this very helpful much.